Hello and welcome to Science and Sleep, where every night we open the door to the greatest secrets of the universe together. Tonight, I will take you back in time not just thousands of years, but billions, to explore the miraculous journey, how evolution built the human body, a masterpiece that is both perfect and fragile, and sometimes clumsy to the point of disbelief. Stay with me until the end, because you will be surprised by the tiny details that determine how we breathe, walk, and even dream. And if you love letting science lull you to sleep, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss any of our journeys on the nights to come. If you want to understand where your body came from, we have to go back to the very beginning, when the Earth had just cooled down after meteor showers and volcanic eruptions. At that time, there were no humans, no animals, not even anything that could be called a cell. There was only a sea of chemicals, scorching winds, and an atmosphere full of toxic gases. Yet from within the chaos, a miracle began. Simple molecules, amino acids, lipids, sugars, linked together into more complex chains. Many scientists call this the primordial soup. It may sound like an unappetizing dish, but it was the very broth that cooked up the recipe for life. Then one day, through the combination of lightning, heat from lava, and millions of years of trial and error, the molecules organized themselves into something special: the first cell. They were like tiny bubbles containing primitive genetic material inside, just enough for them to replicate themselves. No brain, no heart, no organs familiar to us today, only a fragile drop of life drifting in a chemical ocean. But within that simplicity, infinite potential was hidden. For billions of years, life existed only as such single-celled organisms. They breathed in their own way, digested, divided, and occasionally mutated. Imagine them like people working from home. No meetings, no managers, just working alone and duplicating when needed. But then a turning point occurred. One cell, instead of digesting its prey, allowed the swallowed one to survive. Strangely, the one being swallowed became an energy machine that helped its host function better. This was the beginning of endosymbiosis, an unlikely alliance that created eukaryotic cells, the foundation of all complex organisms, from plants to humans. This event was like moving from a cramped apartment into a fully equipped mansion. Suddenly, the cell had a nucleus, mitochondria, chloroplasts. They grew larger, stronger, and capable of specialization. If life had been standing still before, now evolution opened the door to diversity. But remember, evolution has no plan. It doesn't aim for perfection. It just experiments again and again, keeping what is useful, discarding what fails. One of nature's next great inventions was photosynthesis. Some cells learned how to turn sunlight into energy, and in the process, they produced oxygen. At that time, oxygen was waste, but accidentally, it became a gift for the future. From a suffocating atmosphere, the Earth gradually filled with oxygen, paving the way for organisms that could breathe. The world suddenly became more dynamic than ever. Instead of burning energy through inefficient chemical reactions, organisms could now burn more powerfully, move farther, and grow faster. Yet for hundreds of millions of years afterward, life persisted with the single-celled model, simply because teamwork was not easy. When many cells lived together, they had to learn how to communicate, cooperate, and most importantly, not eat their teammates. If you compare this process to living with many roommates, you'll understand. Just one small conflict could break everything apart. But then, some groups of cells found a way to bond tightly. They began to divide labor. One type handled movement, another digestion, others reproduction. From here, the seeds of tissues, organs, and multicellular bodies were sown. At first, these multicellular organisms were extremely modest. Think of squishy creatures invisible under a microscope, but they laid the foundation for the evolutionary explosion that followed. Sponges are among the earliest examples. Though they had no brain, no heart, they already had different types of cells working together to filter water and sustain life. From such primitive structures gradually arose bodies with specialized tissues, a leap that enabled life to move, eat, and react to the environment more effectively. And then another innovation of evolution appeared: body symmetry. Creatures like jellyfish had radial symmetry, suitable for drifting and sensing the environment in all directions. But the real turning point was the emergence of bilateral symmetry, bodies with a left and right side and a head to lead the way. This design opened up the possibility of moving in one direction, driving the development of nervous systems and senses. That was the groundwork for the later appearance of the first eyes, primitive brains, and ultimately the ability to think. It is truly astonishing to think that every organ you possess, from your spine, lungs, to the brain containing billions of neurons, all began from random chemical experiments billions of years ago. Your body is not a perfect machine designed by some engineer, but the result of countless mistakes, mutations, failures, and a few strokes of immense luck. And that is exactly what makes it so remarkable. You breathe, you move, you feel, all thanks to the long chain of changes that began with tiny bubbles of cells drifting in the ancient ocean. If the beginning of the story of evolution was like a slow overture, then at this moment, the tempo began to accelerate. Because at a time more than 500 million years ago, an innovation appeared that completely changed the rules of the game: the notochord, the primitive ancestor of the spine. Imagine a creature as limp as jelly, able only to sway with the current. Now, place into its body a flexible yet sturdy rod of cartilage running from head to tail. Suddenly, it was no longer drifting helplessly, but could contract its muscles, bend, and propel itself at will. That was the turning point that opened the way for an entire branch of organisms, which we call the chordates. Believe it or not, you and a sea squirt, a marine creature that looks like nothing more than a bag of spit, are actually related. Because during development, even the human body once bore common features: a small tail, gill slits, a primitive notochord. Though these traits disappear before you are born, they leave traces in embryonic development, like an original map of evolution drawn in tissue and DNA. Over millions of years, that primitive notochord was reinforced, gradually segmented into small pieces of bone or cartilage, and voila, the spine was born. This was one of nature's greatest architectural inventions. With the spine, organisms not only had a central axis to hang a head, attach ribs, and connect limbs, but also a tube to protect the central nervous system. If the brain was the control center, then the spinal cord inside the backbone was the information highway, allowing every command and signal to travel like data streams across the body's internet. The first creatures with spines were primitive fish. They had no jaws, but they carried within them unlimited potential. Later, some species developed strong jaws to chew their meals. Others developed paired fins to swim faster and more flexibly. Each small improvement opened up new opportunities, and from there, a whole universe of fish exploded in the ancient oceans. Yet the sea was not the only stage. About 375 million years ago, a special character stepped out of the water: Tiktaalik. It looked like a mix between a fish and a crocodile, flat-headed with a movable neck, and most importantly, fins containing a bone structure identical to the basic framework of our limbs today. One large bone connected to two smaller bones, then to clusters of smaller bones resembling the precursors of hands. When you look at the skeletal structure of modern human limbs, you are essentially looking at an upgraded version of Tiktaalik's fins. The interesting thing is, Tiktaalik had no intention of leaving the sea for land in the way we might imagine. It likely lived in shallow waters, using its fins to prop itself up, dragging its body across mud, or floating with its back above the surface to gulp air. But that clumsy experiment planted the seed for a bold evolutionary leap, abandoning the ocean to conquer the land. And why leave the place that had once been life's paradise? Perhaps because ponds and lakes were running low on oxygen, or because on land there were already countless tempting meals, from primitive plants to plump insects. Fish with rudimentary lungs, strong fins, and flexible necks clearly had survival advantages. When opportunity arises, evolution always makes the most of it. Over time, Tiktaalik's descendants became the first amphibians, creatures able to both swim in water and crawl on land. Imagine them like travelers who had not yet learned to use wheeled luggage, moving with difficulty, slowly, but at least managing to set foot in a new land. Though clumsy, that was the starting point for all terrestrial vertebrates, from frogs, lizards, birds, to you. If the spine was the central axis that built the body, then the transition from water to land was the expansion of the stage for countless new roles. The spine supported the body against gravity, jointed limbs enabled walking, and lungs allowed breathing in oxygen-rich air. The terrestrial world, once empty, now became a paradise for new evolutionary experiments. The miracle is that every time you take a step, climb stairs, or bend to pick something up, you are repeating the legacy of those pioneering fish. Your skeletal limbs, whether typing on a keyboard or holding a cup of coffee, still carry the blueprint of ancient fins. And the spine you lean against in your chair is the result of hundreds of millions of years of experimentation, revision, and optimization. Of course, this final product is not perfect. The human spine, which evolved for walking on all fours, had to pay a price when adapting to upright posture: back pain, herniated discs, aching knees. But that price is small compared to the benefits: free hands, wide vision, and the ability to turn thought into creative tools. Evolution did not give us perfection, but adaptation good enough to survive and challenge ourselves. So next time you twist your back and hear a crack, remember that sound is not just a sign of age. It is an echo of history, a subtle soundtrack reminding you that within every vertebra, every joint, still resonates the shadow of Tiktaalik, of those ancient fish that boldly attempted the first steps on damp shores. And thanks to them, you can sit here, take a deep breath, and smile at the realization that your body is a wonder sculpted by billions of years of evolution. If the skin is considered the outer armor, then inside the body, another silent revolution has been taking place for hundreds of millions of years: the birth of the circulatory system and the heart. It is no coincidence that most cultures regard the heart as a symbol of life, love, or emotion. The heart is not just a mechanical pump, it is the primal drum beating steadily, keeping the orchestra of the body in motion. At first, our ancient ancestors, simple marine creatures, only needed oxygen to diffuse through their skin. No heart, no blood vessels, just direct exchange with the surrounding water. But as body size increased and tissues grew denser, simple diffusion was no longer enough. Evolution responded by inventing fluid-conducting tubes, primitive highways delivering nutrients throughout the body. These were the precursors of the circulatory system. Over time, these tubes concentrated into a system of blood vessels, and at its center was the heart. Imagine the first heart as a hollow muscular tube, contracting to push blood forward. Not elegant, not perfect, but enough to carry life further. From that muscular tube, evolution gradually added chambers, creating a two-chambered heart, then three, and finally four chambers like in humans. Four chambers allow oxygen-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood to be separated, enabling us to sustain high energy, run long distances, think complex thoughts, and even dream. Don't forget that every time you climb the stairs and gasp for breath, it is your heart reminding you, I have carried hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Treat me kindly. Alongside the heart, another miraculous invention appeared: the lungs. If gills are the windows to the ocean, then lungs are the gateway to the atmosphere. Primitive lungfish used simple air sacs to breathe air, paving the way for animals to conquer the land. In humans, lungs are not just two air sacs. They are a vast network where hundreds of millions of delicate alveoli open like countless soap bubbles, expanding the surface area for gas exchange to nearly the size of a tennis court. Pause for a moment and take a deep breath. You have just activated one of the greatest wonders evolution ever created. But for the heart and lungs to work effectively, fuel is needed. And that is when the digestive system enters the stage: a long, coiled, and creative tube, transforming everything you put in your mouth into energy for your cells. From simple creatures that swallowed prey whole and waited to digest, our ancestors gradually developed teeth to chew, stomachs to break down, intestines to absorb. Each section of the intestine is a small workshop, and together they form one of the most sophisticated assembly lines in the biological world. Interestingly, the digestive system is also a school for the immune system. Trillions of microorganisms living in your gut not only help digest food, but also train the immune system to recognize friend from foe. In other words, your belly does not just contain food, it contains a bustling city of bacteria where millions of tiny residents live together, cooperate, and sometimes cause a little trouble. Speaking of immunity, that is another spectacular story. Throughout the history of life, bacteria and viruses have always tried to invade the body. Without a shield, multicellular life might have failed from the start. That's why evolution gave us the immune system. an invisible army always on guard. From macrophages devouring bacteria to sophisticated lymphocytes that remember enemies, all work together to protect you. You may have never thought about it, but every time you sneeze, it is the legacy of billions of years of immune battles showing its strength. And at the highest level of the body, housed within the skull, lies the greatest masterpiece, the brain. If the heart is the drumbeat, the lungs the breath, the skin the armor, then the brain is the conductor of the entire symphony. From a primitive cluster of nerve cords and worm-like creatures, the brain developed into a superlative information processing machine, allowing us to think, imagine, dream, love, and create. The human brain accounts for only 2% of body weight, but consumes up to 20% of energy. A massive cost, but clearly one worth paying. Thanks to the brain, we not only survive, but also ask questions about existence itself. Thanks to the brain, you are sitting here, listening, wondering, and smiling as you realize that every small action, from blinking, giggling, to typing on a keyboard, is the result of a chain of evolutionary innovations stretching over billions of years. Of course, every system has flaws. The spine can ache, the skin can burn in the sun, the heart can tire, the lungs can weaken. But taken as a whole, this is still one of nature's greatest successes. A gamble that began with a few drifting cells in the ocean has now created beings capable of pondering the universe. So next time you take a deep breath, place your hand on your chest to feel your heartbeat or giggle at a silly joke, remember that you are the living proof of an endless story, the story of how evolution built the body. The circulatory system is another masterpiece painstakingly refined by evolution. The heart, a fist-sized muscle, has been beating tirelessly from the moment you were born until your final second. It is a biological pump that never tires, pushing blood through a network of vessels stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers within your body. If you were to line up all your blood vessels end to end, they could circle the Earth more than twice. A number that sounds like science fiction, yet it is a reality racing inside you right now. In the earliest, simplest organisms, there was no need for a heart. They relied only on passive diffusion, the movement of molecules from high to low concentration, to bring oxygen and nutrients to each cell. But as bodies became larger and more complex, this process alone was not enough. Some creatures experimented with basic fluid-conducting tubes pumping by contracting their bodies. Gradually, that experiment transformed into a stable design, a heart with rhythm. In fish, the heart initially had only two chambers, one atrium, one ventricle, enough to pump blood through the gills. When evolution moved onto land, that system no longer sufficed. Amphibians, then reptiles, developed three-chambered hearts, allowing better separation between oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood. And finally, birds and mammals, including you, reached the pinnacle, a four-chambered heart. Thanks to this, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood do not mix, providing optimal efficiency for an active, energy-demanding lifestyle. Think of the moment you sprint or climb a hill. Your heart races, pumping faster to deliver oxygen to your muscles. That is not just an immediate reaction, but the result of hundreds of millions of years of fine-tuning. With every beat, you hear the echo of an ancestral lineage of creatures struggling to move, hunt, flee, and survive. And the circulatory system does more than transport oxygen. It is the body's highway, carrying nutrients, hormones, immune signals, and waste. Blood is not just the red liquid you see when you cut your hand. It is a complex solution of cells and proteins. Red blood cells, tiny trucks loaded with hemoglobin, ensure oxygen reaches even your toes. White blood cells, the guards, constantly patrol, ready to fight intruders. Platelets, emergency engineers, rush to patch leaks when wounds occur. In a single drop of blood, millions of workers and warriors labor without pause. The incredible thing is that all this happens without you having to think about it. You don't need to remind your heart to beat or your lungs to breathe. The autonomic nervous system takes care of that, so you can spend your mental energy worrying about exams, dates, or monthly bills. Evolution has programmed life to continue smoothly, even when your conscious mind is elsewhere. But pause here and consider a curious truth. Your heart is not a flawless machine. It has weaknesses, small design flaws, such as blood vessels prone to blockages or the prevalence of cardiovascular disease. That is because evolution never designed from scratch, but always tinkered with what already existed. It does not aim for absolute perfection, only good enough to live and reproduce. Yet from these improvised adjustments, humans gained a circulatory system capable of sustaining a brain that composes poetry, builds cities, and sends spacecraft to Mars. And the brain, the organ that blood and oxygen must continuously serve, is the jewel in evolution's crown. The brain does not merely process sensations, it creates, imagines, remembers, and dreams. Without the steady flow of oxygen from the heart and lungs, the brain would perish within minutes. Every thought of yours, from calculating a math problem to recalling the taste of your New Year's foe, depends on the flawless coordination of heart, lungs, and vessels. It is astonishing to look back. From tiny single celled organisms absorbing oxygen through membranes, to you, a human being capable of writing music, building bridges, and watching the sunrise with tearful eyes. All thanks to the resonance of organs evolved over hundreds of millions of years. Perhaps the next time you place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat, remember that each beat is not only keeping you alive, it is telling the long story of life. From lungfish gasping in shallow ponds to amphibians breathing through skin to desert lizards to your primate ancestors. Your heart is not yours alone. It is a rhythm passed down, revised, and sustained through countless generations. And that brings a strange comfort. In moments when you feel small against the universe, remember that your body is proof of a colossal journey. Every cell, every vessel, every heartbeat is a witness to endurance. Evolution may have no clear purpose, but it has created a living machine both fragile and resilient, namely, you. If the heart is the drumbeat that keeps your body running, then the brain is the conductor of the entire orchestra. It not only sends signals for each muscle to contract and release, but also constructs the world you are experiencing. In fact, you have never seen the outside world directly. The eyes only capture light rays and convert them into electrical signals. The ears only pick up air vibrations. The skin only records pressure, temperature, and pain. Everything you call reality is actually assembled by the brain into a virtual picture inside the sealed skull. The world you're experiencing is a model, a construct in your head, and astonishingly, it is accurate enough for you to cross the street without being hit by a car. But the brain does not stop at reflection. It also predicts. Every moment, the brain constantly forecasts what will happen next, then compares it with sensory data to adjust. That is why you can catch a flying ball or burst out laughing at an unexpected joke, because the brain loves prediction, and surprises are stimulating. This predictive mechanism is also why you imagine your phone vibrating in your pocket when no one is calling, or see a figure in the dark that is just a coat rack. Evolution has given us a brain that leans more toward overly cautious than recklessly dismissive. And in most cases, that saved our ancestors' lives many times. When you look in the mirror and see your familiar face, you may forget that self-awareness is an evolutionary triumph. Many animals do not know they exist, they only react. But the human brain, with a particularly developed prefrontal cortex, has achieved self-reflection, the knowledge that I am me. This opened a new arsenal of mental tools, imagining the future, writing novels, designing machines, even creating stories about the universe and our own origins. What you are reading now, words sparking images in your mind, is living proof of that power. Yet the brain is not a flawless masterpiece. It is like an ancient building expanded over millions of years. The old foundation remains, the reptilian brain, controlling basic instincts such as hunger, fear, and reproduction. On top of that is the mammalian brain, the limbic system, where emotions flourish. And finally, layered over all is the human brain, the neocortex, wrinkled like crumpled paper, allowing abstract thought and language. They do not replace each other, but coexist, sometimes working in harmony, sometimes pulling you in opposite directions. That is why you may crave another piece of cake, yet know you are on a diet, and then convince yourself one more won't hurt. When the brain developed language, humanity truly hacked evolution. Instead of waiting thousands of years for DNA to accumulate changes, we only needed to tell stories, write symbols, and pass down knowledge across generations. A child today does not need to reinvent the wheel. Just a few weeks in school is enough to inherit millennia of accumulated wisdom. This was the leap that made humans completely different from close relatives like chimpanzees or gorillas. Culture became a second form of evolution, faster, stronger, and sometimes more dangerous. Have you ever wondered why the brain is so easily fooled by visual illusions, logic puzzles, or even by its own memory? The reason is that it does not prioritize absolute truth, but survival. See a shadow and mistake it for a tiger, you run, and if it's only grass, no harm. But if you ignore it and it's a real tiger, you won't live to tell the tale. The brain chooses wrong but safe over right but dead. For the same reason, your memory is not a perfectly accurate hard drive, but like a play restaged each time you recall it. It may add, omit, and sometimes completely fabricate. But to evolution, as long as that memory helps you make sensible decisions in the future, it has done its job. Yet this imperfection is also fertile ground for art, religion, and science to flourish. If the brain only calculated mechanically, there would never have been the Mona Lisa, Beethoven's symphonies, or the bedtime stories you whisper before sleep. It is precisely the ability to imagine beyond reality, to believe in what has never existed, that led humans to build pyramids, explore oceans, and launch spacecraft into the cosmos. There is a paradox here. The brain evolved mainly for survival in the jungle, but it is powerful enough to question the meaning of life. A biological organ, soft and fragile, dares to challenge the universe with the question, why am I here? Fish, birds, and monkeys do not ask such things. Only humans, with a 1.4 kilograms brain full of folds, turn curiosity into the driving force of conquest. And as you read these words, remember, it is your brain looking at itself through a mirror made of language. A strange circle. The brain, shaped by evolution, now uses its own power to decipher evolution. As if the universe wrote a story, and at the climax, the main character suddenly realized it was part of the plot. You may forget most of the scientific details here. But if one thing remains, it is this. The brain is not just a control organ. It is the story of billions of years of experiments, mistakes, and successes. It is the bridge between a primal past and an undefined future. And in every thought you have, whether a trivial worry or a bold dream, echoes the voice of evolution. Keep going, keep experimenting, keep living. If the small intestine is a sophisticated processing plant, then you can think of it as a living chemical factory, where billions of reactions occur simultaneously in silence. Along its walls, tiny villi stretch out like a primeval forest, each one covered with countless microvilli, a colossal architecture in a microscopic world. It is here that carbohydrates are broken down into simple sugars, fats into fatty acids, and proteins into amino acids. These tiny fragments not only nourish your body in the moment, but also serve as the raw materials to build skin, muscles, hormones, and even the fleeting thoughts passing through your mind right now. Imagine this. The loaf of bread you ate this morning, just a few hours ago, a soft mass baked golden, has now dissolved into energy, helping you read these very words. That is the magic of the digestive system, transforming the outside world into a part of you. No human technology can compare with such sophistication and efficiency. When leaving the small intestine, the remaining unabsorbed food moves into the large intestine. Here, a vast community of organisms awaits. Trillions of bacteria, sometimes called the second brain, not only survive because of you, but also cooperate with you. They break down fiber, produce vitamins, regulate the immune system, and can even influence your mood and emotions. Recent research shows that the gut microbiome may be linked to depression, anxiety, and even how you respond to stress. In other words, while you think you are making all decisions with your brain, part of the self is actually being negotiated right inside your belly. Evolution did not rush to create this system. Over billions of years, from single-celled organisms that only absorb nutrients to complex multicellular bodies requiring digestive tracts to survive, nature experimented, failed, refined, and repeated. That is why your digestive system is not just a tube, but a biological symphony where every contraction, every drop of enzyme, every bacterium contributes to life. And if you think digestion is just a dull physiological matter, try asking this. Could it be that civilization itself was born thanks to digestion? When human ancestors learned to cook food, they not only made meals tastier, but also unlocked a massive supply of energy. That energy no longer had to fuel a bulky digestive system like that of apes, but instead could nourish an ever-growing brain. A bigger brain opened the door to language, art, tools, and everything that followed. A cooked meal, seemingly simple, may actually have been one of the greatest turning points in evolutionary history. But the digestive system does more than sustain the body. It connects us to the world in a very special way. Every time you bite into an apple, you are taking in sunlight that the tree stored as sugar. Every sip of water you drink was once part of an ancient ocean, and every molecule within you, from hair, blood, to breath, once roamed through nature before becoming you. The digestive system is the gateway for the universe to enter, transform, and become human. So, the next time your stomach growls before dinner, see it not only as hunger's call, but as the ancient echo of billions of years of evolution still at work within you. The digestive system is not perfect. It sometimes causes reflux, bloating, or other very human inconveniences. But its very imperfection reminds us this was not an intentional design, but the result of countless natural experiments. And yet it works so well that it keeps you alive, creating, loving, and dreaming. When you lie down and drift into sleep tonight, remember that in silence, your digestive system is still working. It continues to break down, absorb, and rebuild. It ensures you wake up tomorrow. And with every passing day, your body keeps writing that billions of years long story, a story in which you are the main character. And if you find that the smallest things in the body can open up such vast pictures, stay with us for the next episodes. For this is only the beginning of the journey, from the digestive system to the heart, to the brain, and beyond, all carrying within them the imprints of time, of evolution, and of the eternal question, how did we come to be here? Your face, in essence just a bone structure covered with muscles and skin, is a mirror reflecting an entire inner world. Just a small movement of the facial muscles, a smirk, a fleeting frown, is enough for the person opposite you to understand what you are thinking and feeling. In evolution, this was no coincidence. It is a survival tool. A smile can soothe conflict, while a sharp gaze can warn of danger from afar. Long before language was born, we communicated with eyes and gestures, and sometimes they remain more powerful than words. Sound works the same way. We do not just make calls like many other species, but develop the ability to turn sound into a complex native system, language. Behind every sentence you utter, dozens of small muscles in the mouth, tongue, and larynx coordinate smoothly to produce syllables. But the true miracle does not lie in the sound, but in how your brain attaches meaning to it, then transmits that meaning to someone else. A series of vibrations in the air suddenly becomes a poem, a confession of love, or a secret. This was an evolutionary leap, not only biologically, but socially. Language allows us to share experiences, teach knowledge, and build culture. It means each generation does not need to relearn everything from the beginning, but can stand on the shoulders of those before. Thanks to this, fire was not forgotten, tools were not lost, and our story could continue. If legs carried our ancestors farther geographically, then language carried us farther spiritually. But we did not stop at speaking. We told stories, and storytelling is the foundation of society. A story can connect tens, hundreds, even millions of strangers into a community sharing beliefs, values, and goals. Myths, religions, laws, even nations, all began with the ability to tell stories. At its core, storytelling is also a survival mechanism. A hunter returning and recounting how he was nearly ambushed by a lion. That is a lesson for the whole group to avoid danger. But over time, storytelling became more than that. It is art, entertainment, a way for us to understand ourselves and the world. You can sit in front of a screen for hours just to hear a story. Proof that in your brain, storytelling has been hardwired as an essential need. And for society to develop, we need more than language or stories. We need cooperation. This is one of evolution's great mysteries. Why do humans cooperate on such a large scale, even when there is not always a direct benefit? Part of the answer lies in empathy. Our brains have special cells called mirror neurons that help us understand others' emotions just by observing them. When you see someone in pain, your brain reacts as if you were in pain yourself. This empathy creates bonds, making us want to help, to share, to connect. That bond paves the way for trust. Without trust, there could be no trade, no family, no society. But trust is not always stable. It is fragile, breakable, and sometimes exploited. That is why, along with trust, evolution also gave us caution, the ability to detect lies, to read others through their eyes, voices, and gestures. You may not always be right, but your social intuition is the product of millions of years of living in community. Thanks to all these things, expressive faces, nuanced voices, storytelling, empathy, and trust, humans became a unique social species. We survived not only through hunting or gathering, but through sharing food, collective childcare, and even mourning the dead. These seemingly soft behaviors in reality were our strongest weapons. Imagine this: a lone human on the savannah would hardly withstand the claws of a lion or the speed of a cheetah. But a group of people, cooperating, sharing information, dividing tasks, and most importantly, trusting one another, could overcome those challenges. Society is not a luxury, it is a prerequisite for human survival. And so every frown, every smile, every story told by the fire has pushed us further away from the roots of an ordinary primate. We became a species that knows how to love, to hate, to sacrifice, to dream. And within those social bonds, the human mind expanded, civilization was born, and evolution turned to a new page. So when you text a friend, when you share a joke, or when you simply nod at a passerby, remember that those small acts are in fact continuing a grand evolutionary legacy. Your body is designed to connect, and your mind is programmed to seek attachment. We are not just isolated individuals, we are beings of community, of friendship, of love, and of shared stories.